Welcome back to the Revving Up podcast with Revving Consulting. I'm your host, Matt Haller, and I'm joined with my co-host, Quang Do. Welcome back, Quang.
Hello.
We are joined today with Robbie Taylor, the SVP of Sales at JDA TSG. Robbie, thank you very much for joining us today.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me, guys.
Robbie, I look at your resume, what you've done, consulting, sales. Did you always know you wanted to do this and take this path across customer success and all things to do with sales? And how'd you get to where you are today?
It's a good question. And I think I would be very untruthful if I said I had this whole plan built out in advance, right? I think coming out of college, I really went into management consulting with the concept of I have no idea what I want to do. I want to keep every door open as much as possible. Management consulting to me at that time had been framed as getting your MBA, but out in the real world and getting paid for it. And so that was why I went down that path. And I think it did actually check that box of, okay, I got to get experience with product teams, with operations teams, with sales teams, with customer success teams, and touch them. Didn't go deep on any of them as much in that management consulting capacity. I was giving advice to folks as a 22-year-old straight out of college that I'm not sure I was probably had all of the experience I should have to be giving that advice, but it really enabled me to see how businesses function across the board, and then was able to kind of start refining my path over and over more towards kind of revenue and sales as a whole.
When did you have that aha moment that you wanted to be in sales, wanted to be in front of customers, driving the commercial engine versus being in product or even finance, other things that are called more back office than front office?
Yeah, so my career path was interesting. So I did M&A consulting for PwC straight out of college. And after getting promoted up to senior associate and thought I was a hot shot, I decided to take a break from the business world and go traveling for an extended period. I did about 16 months on the road, went around the world on a shoestring. And so, yeah, I did about 34 countries in 16 months and got that out of my system. And I still recall very vividly being in the middle of Africa on Lake Victoria and on a satellite phone calling my old partner from PwC and saying, hey, traveling's great, but I just can't wait to jump back into the real world. Any chance you might be able to give me a job back at PwC? And so ipso facto, I'm an Australian national, was born in Australia, and they were able to place me at PwC down in Sydney, Australia. And so I was still working for PwC, but as they looked at my background, they immediately said, hey, we're trying to build a bigger presence with Microsoft in the Asia Pacific region. You have experience working with Microsoft. Microsoft had been a longtime client of mine when I worked in the M&A space straight out of school in Seattle. And so I immediately was placed at Microsoft and doing project management type work there. But quickly, the Microsoft team was like, hey, we don't have anyone that has experience at Microsoft headquarters. Would you be interested in joining us full time? The role that we want you to jump into is sales strategy and operations. So leading that for Asia Pacific. At that point, it made a lot of sense for me. It was an exciting role. Financially, it was a step up as well. And so I decided to jump over there. And I would say quickly when you say, okay, then what made you realize you wanted to be more in that getting away from the back of office and more into the front lines? I was managing the forecast. I was managing the cloud strategy. But quickly I realized the people making it happen here are the salespeople. And I was constantly going to them and just saying, do you have an update for me? Is that deal coming in? But I didn't have context of what it took to get a deal across the line. I didn't have a concept of, I was managing billions of dollars of forecast and was not getting what was happening on the other side. So I quickly realized for me to get where I want to go, I need to go figure out how I can get that experience. And I love managing the forecast. I love looking at the strategy, but I want to get in front of people and start actually closing deals because that's where the magic was happening. And so that was how my mindset slowly started shifting.
We talk a lot about the sales and marketing gap, right? And trying to close that, make it easier for sales and marketing teams to work together. But I think you just brought up an interesting one, which is the sales operations gap, where operations, especially sales strategy folks or good operations folks coming out of MBA might be very talented, but it's really hard to empathize with sellers and also have credibility in the room when you haven't closed that deal. When you haven't been that person who's trying to get other people to align, make sure that the signatures are getting signed all by the end of the month, it's hard for you to be like, yeah, no, this guy definitely knows what he's talking about.
Could not agree more. And you can totally tell the people in sales operations that come from sales and are using this as a path to understand the back end of how things work and are using it to leverage themselves to get up to leadership levels and things like that versus lifelong sales ops folks. And don't get me wrong, there's plenty of lifelong sales ops folks that are amazing. But when I was really able to start moving the needle from a sales ops capacity, it was when I would go up to a seller and say, hey, is that deal coming in by Friday? Can I jump on a call with them and support you in getting it closed, right? Like that was where sellers started looking at me and being like, okay, Robbie just doesn't call me every time he just needs an update. I'm like, check the CRM. They're coming to me and wanting to talk strategy on the deal, seeing if I can jump in. And the more that I started to get that exposure and experience, the better I was able to be at that supporting function, the sales operations side. And I was more valuable to the leadership that just wanted the forecast, as well as the seller that was trying to close the deal, right? So there is that middle ground that I think can get lost at times, but I found to be critically important and useful for me as I continue to grow my career.
I don't think that you would necessarily recommend that you bring an ops person on every deal, but what was your in as a sales strategy and operations person? What was your in to helping a seller close that deal? Was it that you could see what other people had sold into other accounts and what tactics they had taken so you can help share some practices? Like, what was the value proposition in bringing you onto that deal as an ops person?
Sellers get so territory focused, so focused on their vertical, their geography, whatever they're tailored into, their BDR system, their enterprise system. And I was looking across the span of the business and I'd seen where the big deals were landing. I'd seen, and also it's not just big deals, it's also the tricky, complex deals that might not be the highest revenue number that they see on the forecast board, but I know took the most strategy and skill to get it across the line. So I had that exposure. I'd say the other piece also, the way that I started getting into them, because I didn't have a ton of frontline sales experience yet, but I wanted to start engaging with leaders on deals, was I said, hey, if the buyer's a CFO or anyone on the finance side, bring me in as the expert from our side that knows how to speak with the CFO and knows how to speak to the finance individual. You can bring me in and say, I'm the subject matter expert. I understand the seat you're sitting in. This is how Microsoft looks at that. And this is how you guys should maybe look at that too. And so it was kind of that combination of scale across the org and understanding how different deals were happening, but then also trying to understand what value set do I bring that the existing seller doesn't, and how can I add value to their deal? Not just saying, hey, I'm probably better at selling than you. Let me just jump on this deal. It's no, here's a reason why I can support you in the sales process, right?
Sellers love hearing that you can do it better than them.
Yes, it's definitely the top way to motivate them.
Going back to something you mentioned a bit earlier, Robbie, I think it's awesome that you took the time to travel and get all those experiences. It's a bit of a left field question, but I'll throw it out there. How has that shaped your leadership style and how that's changed? Did that impact how you view the world and how you manage people? I personally think more people should do that. I've had a chance to do a little bit of that, maybe not nearly as much as you did. I'm jealous, but yeah. Well, how did that change your leadership style?
I was asked by the University of Washington Business School to write a publication about my journey when I was halfway through. And I wrote this article, and I'm not sure if they regret having me write the article after because they published it, but it was very much, don't get stuck in the corporate grind when you're just out of college. Get some experience, go see the world. I've taken so many takeaways from that. I think the biggest one is I made the commitment on that trip that I'm not going to go sit in a desk and sit in a seat in a role that I don't want to do anymore. Life is too short. It did, as cliche as that sounds, I wanted to work on things that I cared about. I saw how fun life could be not working. I knew I was going to have to be working for my career. And so how can I try to take some of those things? And jumping straight into a sales ops role in Sydney, where I was traveling between Thailand and Vietnam and Korea and Singapore and doing all of that, I kept to scratch that itch of I'm having an awesome time and I'm building my career and I'm doing impactful revenue type work. And so I think that piece, I think a really tactical one too. I think I've been able to be quite successful with international business and international sales based on it because I'm able to understand how big the US market is. Don't get me wrong. When I was forecasting the APAC business, it's like half the state of Massachusetts or something. You know, like the US market is just so gigantic, and you notice that and you see that and you understand why it's so important. But you realize that not everyone in the world is US centralized and focused. And so when you do want to do international deals, you do want to expand into other markets. And I've done plenty of working with clients that are looking to get into international markets. There's a huge experience that it's great if you've worked outside the US. You can relate to folks that aren't just super US focused, with the caveat that the US is Super Bowl, right? Like it is the biggest, it is the toughest place to succeed. There's the most opportunity, but there's nuance to doing business elsewhere. And you have to be able to take that lens to do that work.
One of the things I'm taking away from that is finding the fun in work. And I'm curious now, in your role as SVP of Sales, I imagine you have things that are very fun, that excite you and energize you, things that are not so fun, but you have to do. How do you balance that? How do you, as a leader who's responsible for so much, know how to spread yourself on things that you love to do, things that you like to do, and things that you need to do but don't want to do?
That's an awesome question. I think that the answer to that is probably a bit different for everyone. But for me, how I really look at it is I think that the times that I get into work funks where you're just like not enjoying it as much, even if it's some task that maybe in a different mental mindset or framework you would be enjoying, I think it comes down to I enjoy human collaboration. So when I find myself having spent too many days trying to solve problems by myself and not engaging with my team and leadership and things of that nature, I get into spreadsheet, just minutia, and it just starts to be a grind. So on those times where I'm starting to feel that, I just start to think, who else could help me with whatever I'm trying to solve? And then set up time, sit down with them, have a discussion. Hey, here's what I'm dealing with. How would you approach this? How would you tackle it? And then even just a 30-minute discussion with someone totally re-energizes me. And that's because I'm an extrovert, as probably most sellers are in one way or another. I wouldn't say all, but a good chunk of them. And so I just try to solve problems with people. I don't have to go into an office ever. I can work 100% from home. I'm calling in from a WeWork right now. I want people around me. I want energy happening.
So in your current role, you're focused on incubating a new product, a new offering within a larger company. Can you talk to us about what that journey's like and a little bit about what has been different about starting up a new product at an existing company compared to a new service or a new product for a new company?
It's a great question. And to be honest, I was trained really well for this because when I took my role at Microsoft in sales strategy and ops, we were standing up their new digital sales arm. And I was hire number like 3 in Asia. So that became, I don't know how many billions, but lots of billions of dollars of a business unit, right? And we always called ourselves the startup within the biggest company in the world. And there's pros and cons to this, right? The pros, I don't want to say unlimited resources, but resources startups would dream of, especially seed stage startups. Ability to take risks that if they fail, it's not the end of the world. Now, no one wants to fail on a bunch of these things, but if you fail fast on them, leadership is going to be okay with you shooting a shot to try to figure these things out. The cons are big businesses move slower, right? The red tape associated with them. And so how can you be agile and lean while still taking advantage of the niceties of the big business, right? And not also getting too overly comfortable. Like, you know what, this plan doesn't work. I'm sure we can get the bosses to write us another check kind of thing. That's not the mentality you want to have, albeit it is a nice pro to have on the side in case your first A/B test doesn't work perfectly. So in my role now, obviously JDA is not as large as Microsoft. So the risks are higher because a big loss, albeit JDA is a big successful company, will have an impact, and I'm held accountable to making sure that they don't. But I would say that those exact same tenets ring true. I'd say that the toughest mental thing is once you've proven out value in a net new business line, right? We've gone through, so the business line I'm running right now, we've just gotten through our 3rd year with this business line, and we've proven a lot of the things we wanted to prove. We believe it's getting close to ingesting into the bigger business, right? Well, now I'm going to be handing that off and starting again on the next one, right? And so like I've gotten to the point where it's okay, things are going to get a bit easier now. I can sit back and relax. And it's like, nope, hand that to someone else to do that. And you're going to go back through that journey again. And you mentally, you really have to gear back up to start from zero again.
If you can, give us some tactical guidance on like, how do you manage that duality, right? You have a startup, and I've been in startups or involved in startups. If you're not breaking things, you're not doing things right, versus being in a corporation where we have stage gates, we have steps, we have processes. Who's on your team, right? Who do you surround yourself to make sure you're balancing things well? Like if you were, imagine like the zombie apocalypse is about to happen, right?
Yeah.
Who are those 4 to 5 people? What are their skill sets to help balance that duality that you have to exist in?
It's an awesome question. And I think that is the perfect way to phrase it too, which is who are you surrounding yourself with? Because building any form of business, service line, whatever it is, no one's doing it alone. You look at like the best entrepreneurs out in the entire market, what they're really good at is having amazing people around them and then being smart decision makers once they've taken in influence from everyone around them that gives them perspective. And then they can take all of that and refine it into the right path forward. For me, having an operational mind attached to what I do and a product mind, if it's a SaaS product, those 2 things are critically important. The amount of engagements I've gone into in my own business as a consultant on go-to-market strategy that I've run into, that I'm basically advising, you don't need to fix sales yet. You need to fix operations, and then you should talk to me. And you know that oftentimes they're just like, I just need to sell another $1 million this year, Robbie. What should I do? I'm like, if I actually gave you a strategy to sell $1 million, you wouldn't be able to execute it and your business would fail. So first, what we need to do is figure out how to stand up everything operationally. And so I've started to partner with, and over the last 3 years, I have one operational counterpart. His name is Max Colden, who's now full-time at JDA with me as an SVP of Sales Operations, who is my right-hand man for everything operations. So anytime that I'm looking at something, he pressure tests me on, I don't know if we should be doing this because of this, that, whatever operational mindset, which I appreciate. I tend to be like the moon shooter, and then he brings me back down to reality. So an operational counterpart. And then if you're doing anything from a SaaS perspective, not having an engineer weighing in on just about everything you're doing, or at least someone with a product mind, you're misstepping. Because when I'm speaking with a client, I'm like, absolutely, we can do that. No problem. And then the product person's like, actually, Robbie, that's like a 3-month roadmap to build that. I'm like, really? It's like adding a couple buttons. What are you talking about? So I think product and ops are the two big ones that I always just feel like I want strong advice from at all times in any decisions I'm making.
Can you take us inside a meeting between you and Max? Like, how does that partnership work? And what do you think is the secret sauce for making a strong sales ops relationship that's fruitful?
Our meetings are very much Robbie saying, we can solve all the world's problems immediately, and let's just go do this. And he's, okay, Robbie, I'm going to quickly just do back of the envelope math on how much that's going to cost before you can go talk to a customer. And I'm like, do you have an idea? What's your better idea? Let's hear it. Not that I'm like visionary and just moonshots at all times. I do like to think I've learned from experiences, and I'm not always overly impractical, but I think I want to move faster, and Max is much more tactical about how he approaches things. Like a perfect example is for JDA, we rolled out a HubSpot environment for our new business line. We rolled out a bunch of dashboarding items that were connected in with invoicing tools, ERP system, like kind of the whole gamut for our net new business line that were different than the broader business because we had different needs. Going back to the thing of what's it like being in a big business with a small one, the big business is CRM, the big business is dashboards, all of that. It didn't work for our little startup within the business. We had to rebuild all of it. And I'm like, all right, Max, going to deploy HubSpot tomorrow. I know the fields that we're going to do. Like what he's like, actually, we need to deploy Airtable to suck data out of it. We then need to use software to integrate on top of Airtable to then provide this level of customization for the dashboarding because I need Stripe to integrate here. And then I need Odoo to connect in at this point. I'm like, all right, well, I was just thinking about managing the pipeline and making sure that I can keep track of the forecast and the revenue. And he's got all these other operational items in his mind. We probably would have been able to do my plan for the first 6 to 12 months. But then we would have had to rebuild it all from scratch, right? And so Max was able to make it so we have a sustainable growth plan operationally and opens me up to be able to go and have all of the big picture partnership and growth conversations I want to have because I know operation on the back end, we're going to be able to take it on. And I have that level of confidence.
I know we talk about the whole like sales ops relationship as a marriage, but it really does feel like it is that way, right down to, oh, really? You think it's that easy to just take the kids for the summer? No, haven't thought about these 10 other things that I do in order to get you out the door in the morning.
Could not be more accurate. We were sitting at a leadership dinner at an offsite, and Max and I had a different perspective on, we were talking about how we were going to house some specific data for the business, and all the CEO and the other C-suite members are all sitting around. And I presented my idea, and it was a casual dinner, right? Max said, actually, I think, and they all stood up and went, they disagreed on something. We've never seen this before. Like they all look at us as just a marriage that comes to them like we're always on the same page. But what they don't see is actually it takes us sitting down for hours to get on the same page. So at the time they hear us, we're on the same page. But I found that super validating because I actually think people almost never agree on anything. It takes us forever to get to agreement. But our C-suite executives that we're working with to build these businesses have the perspective that we're always on the same page. So they got to see how the sausage was made because we're having an informal discussion at dinner versus normally it's Max and I in a room figuring things out and then being a unified front.
What's your advice for the sales leader? You need someone that is navigating you, helping you see ahead of the turn. So what's your advice for both those parties and how do they find each other?
If you get down to my big picture advice on this aspect as a whole, I think that I, compared to most sales leaders, lean into analysis heavily. And I think that comes from my sales operations background. I used to spend my life building models and spreadsheets, right? And so now when I'm making decisions, I haven't just been a deal closer my whole career. I actually spent a good portion of it doing analysis. And so I think it's almost my biggest fault where I spent too long. I love a model. Matt knows this and has seen me like hammering away at models, building models, analyzing them, et cetera. And so I think you have to build a level of mutual respect. I think at lower levels, it's a bit challenging if you don't have much autonomy. I think as you get into upper management director above, and you do start to own a budget, own a P&L, own relationships with your counterparts in ops, whatever it may be, it's really about understanding that there's a reason that your roles are distinct and different. And that they definitely look at things in a wildly different way than you. And if you get pigeonholed and have tunnel vision on this is how it should go because for top line, it makes sense, you're missing the bigger picture. And that's why I love, we talked about enterprise versus startup and the benefits of like startup versus not. Anyone who's been in startups their whole career, don't get me wrong, those people that just crash down doors, etc., they are amazing at dealing with ambiguity and solving tough problems very quickly and A/B testing and all of that. But they oftentimes, if they never spent any time in big business, don't understand the probably overly laborsome but important analysis and frameworks and all of that aspect that big business do. People that have been in big business their whole career and never in startup spend their whole life analyzing and then don't know how to just fail on something, give up on it, move quickly, break down things. And so that combination that I've gotten through my career of half the time with two of the biggest companies in the world, PwC and Microsoft, and then half the time either in my own business or in scrappy startups, I think I take the big business side, apply it to the small business side, and try to be as self-aware as possible when I'm saying, hey, you're moving too slow, you're overanalyzing this, just like go break a glass real quick and it'll probably get you to something quicker. But at least I know in my heart, I at least analyzed it. And this isn't a shot in the dark. There's a reason why I'm moving in one way or another. And I think that combination has been dangerous for me, and advice that I would give to people earlier in their careers is if you can get a balance of both, it's really dangerous and helps you with perspective massively.
We're coming to the end of our episode, but I want to close with just one kind of question about talent. We talked a little bit about sellers going into ops roles in order to elevate their roles in the future and their experiences. But we don't hear a lot about ops people going into sales. You made that switch. Why should a sales leader consider hiring an operations person as their next sales hire? And why would they not do that?
So this is my biggest gripe with standard old school sales leaders. You have to have carried a bag if I'm going to hire you. I've heard that so many times. And honestly, I heard it a bunch when I was coming out of ops trying to get into sales. Was like, sorry, you haven't carried the bag, you can take a BDR role. And it's like, really, that's our perspective, is that unless you've already done an account executive role, you can never have sold before. And I just think that's fundamentally incorrect. I have hired so many salespeople that don't have any sales experience, but I can tell they're going to be phenomenal sellers just by the way that they look at business, the way that they interact interpersonally, and things of that nature. I think oftentimes I have leaned maybe too much into that. So you're probably asking the right person, because I tend to like people that are really interested in sales versus like, well, I'm just a sales guy, so I'm just going to just keep plugging away at sales because this is the bed that I've made, right? So I think that bringing a fresh perspective, especially if you've got a team, right? So if you have a team, let's call it 5 AEs, if everyone has the same background from the same verticals, that if we're all BDRs and then all became AEs and a couple are enterprise AEs now, like, are you really getting that much of a diverse perspective in that room? Everyone's coming from the same perspective. If you have someone that, was a product manager for a couple of years and wants to dip their toes in sales to see if this is a better path for them or not, like, they're going to wildly look at problems and forecasting and, strategic selling way differently. The person that's been on the back end of the operational forecast for a couple of years, they're going to wildly look at things differently, right? And so if you have a balance of all these on your team, if you're a manager hiring for this, you should welcome and applaud intelligent, smart, driven people with a diversity of background that want to get into sales. The one thing I would caution, do not force people into sales roles that don't want to try it, because those people are not going to do well if they don't want to do it. But people that have the desire and will to at least test it out and have a diversity of experience that isn't sales, as long as they're willing to put in the work and they have the thick enough skin to hear some no's, that they're going to be in a position to be successful, and they're going to make you as the leader of that org really successful.
I mean, if we make our marketing organization do A/B testing on the digital campaigns, it might as well do the same thing with your sellers and not hire the exact same profile over and over again. But that's also the reason why we have 2 episodes for all of our guests, so we can A/B test those too. So that's all the time we have for this episode of Revving Up with RevEng. Robbie, thank you so much for sharing your career story and some tips and tricks. We're going to be back next week for another episode where we dive into a specific chapter in Robbie's career and see how he handled it. Tune in next week.